Welcome, everyone. If you've joined us, go ahead and pick a bean bag or sit on the lawn there for us. We'll have Sewell will be on our stage.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Well, I'm excited today to introduce Sewell. She is a friend of mine as well as a brilliant technologist. And I'm doing a little bit of a bio here because I'll just go off Sewell and tell all kinds of things if I don't. So she's an energetic business leader and goal oriented. I love that she loves data. She's been in this world for a very long time. She's skilled at coupling her technical acumen with storytelling. If anybody knows me, that's the superpower, I think, of using the right brain and left brain. She can articulate your business values with early stage. She does this for early stage startups all the way to enterprises and many of those companies that are leaning into data, AI, and technology as a competitive advantage. So she wants to make sure that she preserves a legacy in which they are founded upon, but make it friendly and practical. So, Sol, thank you so much for coming here today with us. I'll hand the stage over to you.
Sure. Just a quick raise of hands. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amber, and just the whole team in general for welcoming here. What I'm about to share with you is what I would say 20 plus years of scraped knees in the last 13 in AI. As of recent, I actually resigned from Estee Lauder, but I was their chief analytics officer, and I had data, AI, and analytics under my remit. Prior to that, I was the chief data analytics officer for Merck Pharmaceuticals. Prior to that, for Sony Music, and prior to that, the chief data and AI officer for Royal Caribbean. But everything kind of started when I helped IBM. I was one of the partners that helped launch Watson. And so we failed fast, we failed forward, and there was a lot of lessons learned from that. So if anyone wants to have a sidebar conversation, I'm happy to do that. But today, one of the reasons why I'm no longer working for enterprises is the space is fast and it's moving exponentially quicker than I think any of us are used to. I'm in this space and I can barely keep my finger on the pulse. And this is the stuff that I love to do because I'm a bit of an alpha nerd. So I can only imagine what it's got to be like, just in someone else's shoes who's not a data geek or hasn't been doing quote unquote AI, the past 13 plus years. So hopefully today will be a culmination of just 13 years of scraped knees, things that I'm viewing and seeing. And then, of course, I'd love to stop and take breaks and, let the team ask questions. So without further ado, all right. So just as a quick introduction, I born and raised in California, moved to New York City, and then as of 8 years ago, moved to Miami. And when I moved to Miami to take on the chief data and AI officer role for Royal Caribbean, there wasn't a tech scene. All the crypto and NFT group was not here. We didn't have anyone supporting the private equities and VCs. All the stuff came post COVID. But there was a few of us technologists who needed to build the teams and create those capabilities, one of them being Royal Caribbean. So we kind of started the tech scene here without even knowing we were starting a tech scene. People who weren't studying data science, we set up curriculums at University of Miami and FIU. We partnered up with Wincoders. We were creating a bit of a buzz and the hype so that we could attract more tech talent because it was non-existent. What I studied has nothing to do with what I do now. I actually thought I was going to be a professional athlete my whole life. I played rugby on the women's national team. And then, as you know, everyone, recovery is a lot more difficult the older you get. So I hung up my cleats and took the job that no one wanted, and that was to be a data engineer. And then since then, it's Christmas treat its way up. My team and I, each team that I build, we've done some pretty awesome things. I think part of it is because we're not afraid of failure. So we have about 8 patents across a few different sectors and industries, and luckily, with good fortune, been awarded a few accolades. So I kind of want to just break the ice a little bit here, if you will. I always say, what do AI and teenage topics have in common? In general, everyone talks about a topic or something. Nobody really knows how to do it or what it is. Everyone thinks the other person's doing it, so then they claim that they're doing it. That's typically how AI works as well. I'm sure everyone's like, oh, we do this, we do that. But a lot of it is kicking the tires, having discussions. Maybe they've started a POC or functioning prototype, but very few companies have actually, unless you're tech-based, have had, much maturity or progression in this space. Um, so what I thought we'd do is just kind of discuss a little bit of growth trends, then we go into frameworks and then some of the lessons learned. A recent study from McKinsey said that the impact on the global economy is in trillions. I personally think this is hard to predict. We have absolutely no idea, but if your range is $12 trillion impact, it's kind of hard to screw that part up. It's a pretty broad range, but the only takeaway here is really that there's going to be opportunity, no doubt about it. And a majority of it is not necessarily top line growth, but how do we increase productivity within the existing workforce? And that means doing more with the same amount of staff. And then if you take a look at some of the key areas that they are assuming it's going to impact most, it's sales and marketing, software engineering, and customer operations. Now, customer operations has been around for a while. It's not really sexy, for lack of a better way of saying it, but it is the one use case that has been explored the most. And I'll give you a little fun stat in a second. But in general, if you take a look at all of the industries, which is to the left, and then if you take a look at all the functions in the top right, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, healthcare, automotive, manufacturing, the number one and most popular use cases are all within the sales and marketing function. Now, can anyone take a guess as to why?
It's where the money is.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Answers are expected sort of.
Sorry, one more time.
Cindy, go ahead.
I was just saying that sales and marketing customers sort of want answers quickly.
Definitely.
Michelle, you had one?
There are a lot of repeatable processes that can be automated.
Absolutely. And in addition to everything you guys just mentioned, the reason why ChatGPT became so famous and popular, and it was released by OpenAI, was because they took a channel strategy that no other enterprise did. You take a look at Watson, if you take a look at C3, if you take a look at Salesforce, all of their AI capabilities are B2B. OpenAI released ChatGPT direct to consumer and for free. And so now all of a sudden you had citizens who now became citizen data scientists and they could generate their own content. And copywriting was one of the areas that was impacted the most. So whether you're creating a brochure, a marketing collateral, a presentation, pre-sales, post-sales, you actually don't have to come up with the content from scratch. You can write a prompt in ChatGPT and it'll actually give you a pretty good response back. And so not only is it the easiest to do, it's kind of goof proof, but also the channel strategy really, really helped accelerate that. So now in terms of AI use case deployments by the end of 2003, so what's been deployed and what's going to be deployed, you'll notice that the customer experience is number one. And take a guess as to where that is.
Retail?
It's usually the call center. Yeah, it's the call center operations. So what ends up happening is it takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months to onboard someone from the call center team. Not only is the hiring process extensive and costly, but to get them upskilled, trained on the marketing reviews, materials, products, etc., is a very, very lengthy and costly process. Now, interestingly enough, they can't be productive from day one. It takes them time, so they often have to shadow someone who's been there a while. Then they have to learn the material before they're actually set out on their own. And so what they've determined is that if they were to give them a ChatGPT-like capability that ingested all the company's documentations, they could use that as a virtual assistant in case someone calls and they don't know the answer or they're stumped and don't really know how to respond. And so that's the one that's having the most traction. But if you take a look at all the other use cases, not that glamorous, not that sexy. Like anomaly detection, American Express has been doing that phenomenally for years. There's debate. Is it AI? Is it not AI? Anomaly detection includes prediction models, which is a practice of data science. Like there's discussions to be had, but most of all the other fancy use cases that folks are discussing, those are still in flight. They haven't necessarily been tried and true yet. So now into some frameworks and deployments. You know, oftentimes when I need to speak with an executive, or I'm doing an executive workshop, the first thing I want to do is make sure that we're all defining AI in the same way. My running joke is you ask 10 people, you're going to get 120. But they can all kind of ground themselves on machine learning. Okay, well, but even within the AI world, there's automated intelligence, augmented intelligence, and artificial intelligence. I've worked for some Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies that have been great. I haven't found a single use case where artificial intelligence is needed. But most of the productivity and growth capabilities are either automated intelligence, because there's just manual work that people are doing, where if you write a script, it can be automated. And then augmented intelligence, which is where the customer service operations use case falls into. But at least within corporations, there isn't a strong use case for anything artificial necessarily. Now, the different verticals. Folks use a ton of different languages interchangeably. Machine learning, data science, generative AI. These are all, and these are just to name some, but they're different verticals within the AI world. One doesn't replace the other, but a lot of the use cases and capabilities that are created is by combining a combination of two of them or two with three. So for example, when we released Watson, we didn't call it generative AI. The term hadn't even existed. It was big data with natural language processing on top of it. Or if anyone's ever played with Midjourney or Dolly, that's all image recognition, but it's image recognition combined with deep learning, combined with generative, and combined with big data. So all the use cases are a variety of these things. Now, without me having to read through each of these, I want you guys to take a quick second and just kind of go through, here's some AI-based industry use cases. And I've included some big ones like healthcare and automotive and financial services. Just take a quick read. Any of these surprise you or any questions on any of them? All right. So now my favorite is generative AI use cases, because this is the one that's the most approachable for all of us as individuals. So the ability to transcribe, and I'm going to give you a really interesting use case that I didn't even think about, but we just came up and discovered last week. There is a private jet company that brokers private jets. They buy from people and sell to other people. These are usually CEOs of corporate Americas or very, very wealthy families. And so they brokerage jets. As part of that brokerage process, they have to do audits on these aircrafts. And the audits can take 4 to 5 hours. And they are getting into the hood, the cockpit, they're getting underneath the plane. One of the challenges that they had was the fact that, you've got these old technicians who know aircrafts really well. They're writing notes on pen and paper. And part of the audit process is to make sure that they're complete in all the checks, because they've got to go through everything from oil connectors, spark plugs, integrators, interior, exterior paint, everything. Well, they're relying on their memory and the experience to make sure that it's comprehensive. But as they're crawling through and digging, pen and paper is really difficult as well. So we noticed that the data wasn't as good when they were doing these audits, and sometimes there was a financial consequence. Well, one use case that we created for them is, why don't they use one of the AI transcribing software out there? So even they're used to taking pictures of the exterior, but instead of pen and paper, They can use their phone, use that software, and just talk into it. And they can talk about the condition of that part. They can talk through what they just checked and whether it passed or failed the inspection. As they're talking through the phone, it transcribes it into text. And then you can use another piece of software that then takes that text and summarizes what passed, what failed, and follow-up steps. So totally random. That wasn't even the intention of the exercise, but we found a use case that would actually not only increase the quality of the information, the completeness of the information, but it was a lot easier for that technician to do their audits. And we're talking about the 30-year veteran who only uses their phone for texting and speaking with grandkids. Like that's how old, that's how antiquated, if you will, their means were and what they were used to. But they said, if all I have to do is talk to the phone, I can do that, not a problem. So that's an example of transcription that we discovered a week and a half ago, and it's amazing how, creativity and technology combined can do wonders. So I'll just take a pause here. Um, any questions on the use case or anything that's inspiring you guys, your business, or if you have a problem and you're trying to think, how can generative AI help me? Like, we can absolutely use this as a forum to discuss. Please don't be shy.
And if they do so, do you just want them to raise their hand so they?
Just speak up. Yeah, nothing formal.
I think a lot of us are still out there learning,
Yeah,
getting
no,
advice, pulling it
no problem. So we talk about AI and it's great, but I think very few folks actually have the experience of deploying AI-based solutions. And so I always say this is a slide that aggregates 13 years of experience. You've got to be able to define it first, come up with the use cases. Instead of analysis paralysis, do a fast prototype. If you don't have the talent, you bring them from the outside. Make sure your use case aligns with what data is available. Then you have to choose, are you going to build your own proprietary AI model, or are you buying one off the shelf because, acceleration to market is key. Then you have to come up with a standard way of communicating progress and status and KPIs and OKRs, however which way you guys measure success internally. And then there's an aspect of infrastructure that I think a lot of folks have underestimated that needs to be considered. But before you even get into the framework and before we discuss each one, I think setting expectations is super key. For some reason, there's this notion, because as great as it is, it's built this hype around it's a silver bullet. It's going to solve all my problems. But what I like to share is, when we launched, when Watson beat Ken Jennings in Jeopardy in 2011, which is what launched Watson into the market, it did so with a 71% accuracy. That's like saying your kid who comes home with a C minus is doing a great job, and that's not the case. If you look at ChatGPT's range, it's anywhere from 70 to 85%. So better, but still not perfect. Now it does really well on tests with finite content like the LSATs or the MCATs, but part of that 800 billion parameter build that it has is anyone in the world is supposed to be able to type it a question and it's going to have an answer to. Now you can imagine how difficult that is. So getting it to 100% is just really difficult. And so right now, we hear about the hallucinations, we hear about false facts. We heard about the lawyer in New York City who cited 3 cases to win his case when he was in court, only to find out that those cases didn't exist. They were completely made up. Now, if you ask me, he's a lawyer. His job is to do forensics. Why on earth would he not research those 3 cases? I don't know. That's a different story. But this is where it's not 100% foolproof. So if you're building use cases, make sure it's in a place where it can tolerate that 15% error level, because it's not going to be perfect. And by the way, neither are humans, but for some reason, there's just this expectation that, these should be perfect. My other favorite is, like, if you look at these 2 images, right now, machine learning can't tell the difference between a blueberry muffin and a chihuahua. We as humans absolutely can. This is where machines are tripping. Or I typed in, Dolly, like salmon in water. Well, we both know we're talking about the fish. But look how contextually got it incorrect. It put a fillet in the water. And sometimes, it won't know the difference between cold feet unless you give it, and this is where prompt engineering kicks in, a lot of context prior to. Because when I type in cold feet, is it because the temperature's cold and my feet are cold? Or is it because I have cold feet before my wedding? These are the things that have to be trained on in order for it to understand context. And that's why the world of prompt engineering is so strong, is you have to feed it as much context as possible so it knows what you're referencing. So just a quick pause. Anything fascinating or interesting here, or anyone want to share an experience that they've had? Yes,
I think,
please.
double A's been using it a lot for generative backgrounds, and we find this same problem. You ask it to do a blue chair and you get some weird funky, arms are up top and the feet aren't even in the right spot. And so, it's how specific can you be in order to get what you want, even when you want it to be creative for you. So there's this weird, like, you still have to be specific, but yet you still want to be general enough to get something that's different than, maybe something you can't conceptualize. So yeah, it's a weird dichotomy right now within the generative space for sure.
100%. And like you can say, I want a cat in the Magic Kingdom, black and white and illustration, because those are concrete. But anything that becomes personalized to us, like put me in the Magic Kingdom in a black and white illustration, you'll notice there's contortions to your face. It may add an extra finger. Like it can do all sorts of funky stuff. That's what I'm saying. It's leaps and bounds what we had available, but by no means is it 100 for 100. Now, in terms of talent, it's interesting. Every time I have discussions with my HR team, and I'm like, hey, I want to build a data science team, or I need to build a machine learning algorithm, or, if we're going to go move forward with generative AI, I need a talent pool. And they're always like, okay, great, give us the specs and we'll go out and look for them. And I'm like, well, with all due respect, how are you going to find them? Because this is not a space that you necessarily play in. And so, I heard this individual speak and I thought what he did was brilliant. And now I use it as my litmus test for my HR recruiting teams. And I say, I will 100% give you the recruitment of the team if you can tell me the difference between what is a data science skill and what is a Pokemon character name. And that's what this is. You'll see the difference between the pink and the blue. And of course, they're not going to know. But like PyTorch could be the name of a character, but it's not. So this is the litmus. I'm like, if you can tell the difference between these two, then 100% you're qualified to help me recruit the talent. If not, then we're going to be spinning our wheels anywhere from 6 months to a year. And by then, we won't even need this capability because we'll already be outdated by the time we launch it. The other one that everyone always underestimates, and I started my career in data, is data. It's gone down a little bit to 60%, but about 70% of the effort is truly identifying the data that can be used and ensuring there's no HIPAA or PII information, understanding all the different source systems that that data resides, so collecting it, aggregating it, then the cleansing of it, because we all know the old, data adage, junk in, junk out. Well, data is to AI what petroleum fuel and electricity is for a vehicle. It doesn't operate without it. So if you've got horrendous data or not enough data, how do you expect your AI to function? It won't. And so a lot of teams end up underestimating this particular section in the roadmap. And I always say, assume 60 to 70% of your time easily. And if it's a lot less, then we're all delightfully surprised. And then for those of us who are in marketing and sales, communication is key too. Now, we hear this. Storytelling is key, narration is key. But if any of you guys are approaching any subject where you've got to convince, influence, sell a topic to a series of executives or peers, making sure that the language aligns is super key. And this is like a running joke. I took this cartoon and I thought it was freaking hilarious because, I just want to read this out loud to you. Our marketing plan is simple. We just need to focus on CRM and CMS, on an ABM for higher CLV and lower CAC, while A/B testing for CTA and UX for our CRO and hope we get some WOM. And then look at the guy to the back and he's like, WTF. Now, all those acronyms exist, whether it's content management system, customer relationship management, call to action, work order of magnitude, conversion rate optimization. If you're not in that field, you don't know those acronyms. And that's just the case. And I hate to say it, but you've got to explain it like a fifth grader. Don't assume people know the acronyms. And if they don't, you've got to clearly illustrate what it is and what you're trying to do to make sure you're all singing the same song from the same hymn sheet. Don't overestimate or underestimate people's knowledge, because a lot of people are faking it while they're making it. And so regardless of how you feel about yourself, just go in knowing that they probably don't know these things. So outline it very clearly for them. And then I think the other aspect of it with AI is we do ourselves a disservice, because typically when we're getting sponsorship, and this could be with any project, it doesn't have to be AI related, but if there's tech involved, we price something based on the POC. You'll get that support and you'll build a POC. The challenge is to push that code into production to actually make it operational is a completely different beast. And unless you incorporate that budget into your roadmap and timeline and get support for it, what ends up happening with most executives? They're onto something else. No longer a shiny toy, and you're never going to get the resources to actually operationalize something. And what you're left with is a POC that's being used in an operational purpose, and then people complain as to, well, why is it loading so slow? Why are there performance issues? You're like, because we built it as a demo. We didn't build it for hundreds of thousands of people being on it, and we didn't get resources for it. So if you're ever in charge of project management, make sure that you always allocate the piece for the discovery, the design, the development, and POC release, but make sure you include that last mile to push it into production. Otherwise, you'll always be in perpetual POC purgatory. And I've had many POCs that are still operating. I think this one's a little bit too technical, but there are infrastructure needs that just fundamentally need to be considered. And I think it's really ignored nowadays. Infrastructure is just not cool. It's not sexy. Everyone wants to talk about what AI does. But just know that anyone who's pushing anything into production, or it's part of their company DNA, they've had to make an investment in infrastructure to get it to where it is. There's no way around it. And as a sidebar, if you ask me what concerns me today about the state of AI, we hear about AI compliance and ethics. Elon Musk even said we should probably take a 6-month pause until we come up with a governance model in place. Thing to remember is Russia and China don't have the same moral compass as we do. And so they're moving forward. Should we really be pausing? There's no right or wrong answer to that, because there's just naturally defensively. We've got to be in a posture and a position to be able to defend ourselves if they take it for a turn. I think there are industries that are absolutely going to be disrupted. Very similar to Blockbuster and Netflix. That's like, the use case that everyone thinks about. So which industries go away and which ones thrive? And then I think there are local impacts at a company level, at a talent level. Most of us probably don't think about managing a P&L, but there's a line item in EBITDA around amortization. And that is, you essentially have to tag any piece of investment and their useful life. And then you get to write that investment off. But there are no standards in AI. So everyone's financial statements, if they're investing in AI, is going to look differently, because if you deploy an AI capability in pharmaceuticals, well, that industry doesn't move too fast. So that useful life is 10 years. But if you deploy it in a tech-based company, tech-based companies move really fast. It could be 6 months. There are no financial standards on how to amortize AI capabilities. The last is data. Of course, everyone's heard about what Samsung happened in Italy, and people put proprietary information in ChatGPT, the free version, and it trained its model on that. Every company has to take their own precautions. There's no doubt about it. And then the fourth one that I think would be interesting is, I think there's going to be an element of intellectual atrophy that may kick in for a set of individuals, because instead of thinking through, and instead of developing your critical thinking skills of how do I write an omni-channel strategy in retail, or I need to curate generate a company memo, or I want to write a marketing collateral that hits the following 9 points, you no longer have to think about that stuff. You can actually go to any one of generative AI models and just say, hey, explain omnichannel retail to me and the 9 pillars that are needed to deploy it in a brick and mortar based company that's pivoting to e-commerce. And it will give you a very, very robust framework. We don't have to think about that anymore. So what are consultants going to be doing? What are we going to be doing? How do we validate what's true, what's not true? We just lose that muscle to be able to think on our own. And while I don't think AI is going to replace humans per se yet, computers didn't replace humans, calculators didn't replace humans. It becomes a tool. I do think, going back to the first pillar, there are some things that just aren't going to be needed anymore. We can automate them, we can augment them, but more than likely, everything's going to become a virtual assessment. So if you've got kids in school, how do you assess one person smarter than the other if they all are going to be getting their answers from ChatGPT? Or, if you're at your work and you're responsible for marketing collateral and SEO and keywords, how do you distinguish yourself? Because if everyone's using a machine and you're not, are you at a disadvantage? So now everyone's going to be using machines. So now which machine is smarter? Those are some of the things that I'm thinking through, if you will, on my runs. And I'm like, how is this going to shape up in our world? So those are the things that kind of concern me, or the things I'm thinking about. But with that said, are there any questions before we wrap up? I will stop sharing. Oh, thanks for the love. I appreciate that.
I have a question. I'm wondering what you think about the future of like prompt engineering, because it seems to me that,
Yeah.
like, for example, the example of the students.
So
Not
I guess if we have questions, we can just hop in.
Oh,
So
Michelle, Hillel is asking a question. Could you not hear him?
No, the volume's really low, but I did hear prompt engineering.
Yeah. Hello, can you turn
Yes.
up your volume?
I'm wondering what you think about the future of prompt engineering, because like the example you gave about the students using ChatGPT, it seems to me that there are better or worse people at actually getting ChatGPT to give them a good output. So
Yeah.
is it possible that that'll become kind of a way for humans to distinguish themselves? Is becoming pretty good at prompt engineering and actually working with the AI um, in a way that other their peers might not be able to.
Yeah, it's a great question. At first I thought so, but there's a few things that are making me not think so. Um, Prompt engineering is a way to give the computer instruction on what to do and what you want in return. But the machines are going to become more and more intuitive by default as they continue to get trained on context. So I think there is an inherent intuition that's going to start kicking in, so it doesn't require the specificity of prompt engineering. And there's several studies out there suggesting so. I think the second is I've seen quite a few great AI tools. Like, I don't use ChatGPT. I have other preferences. And in those preferences, I'll actually read you what it asks me. First, it asks me what language. Then it asks me what tone. Do I want it to be assertive, convincing, casual, cautionary, earnest, enthusiastic? What type of thing I'm writing? Is it a blog session? Is it a business pitch idea? Is there a call to action? My topic, and then the keywords. And then there's a creativity barometer on how creative do I want it to be, or do I want it to stick to the script? It's removed the guesswork of prompt engineering. It's done it for me within like 5-6 questions. And that's the tool that I use for commodity-based stuff that I don't have. It's something I need to do, but don't have time to do, but I need to publish. I don't need to learn prompt engineering, to be honest with you. And if you do want to learn prompt engineering, there are thousands of videos of how to do prompt engineering. So it level sets the playing field. So either everyone's going to learn, or they're just going to not need it, or tools are going to incorporate it so you don't need to know how to do it, but it asks the questions in a concrete way. Great question, though.
Michelle, did you have a question?
Yes. Hey, thanks, Amber. A very, very interesting dialogue, and thank you for all of the information. I'm in a position where I am going to be looking at creating an algorithm to help ingest data and obviously spit something out that's IP based. But are there any tools currently that help me DIY that? I don't mind getting my hands dirty and digging in deep sometimes, but from a scalability and speed, are there tools that can do that? Or is it best at this point to find the right person who could actually build that? I'm not interested in creating my own LLM. It's can I algorithm that can help me be a foundation for something I'm trying to do.
Do you have a data science team, or are you trying to do this on your local computer?
No, I'm a very early stage startup, so I do not have a data science team today.
Because there's the raw way of doing it, where you take a sample set of any data and you dump it into Jupyter notebooks and you play with models to see what gives you the ideal output. Then there's a more comprehensive way of doing it, but also shortcuts it. You can leverage the OpenAI API, and that way any of your own data that you're ingesting is secured. And then what happens is once you ingest it via the API, you can still use the ChatGPT interface to ask it questions. So you don't actually have to build the algorithm per se. What you can do is leverage the APIs that are done it for you already. Unless you're trying to build a proprietary algorithm for a specific business you're in, then you've got to go through all the data science models and ingest the data, train the data, make sure that there's model performance. And once it hits that performance, then you're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We had two questions in the chat about the name of the tool that you were referring to, where you can type in your prompts, if you're willing to share that.
Sure. One of them is writer.me. The second one is Hyperwrite. And one of my other favorites is, where are you? It always likes to disappear on me. Hypotenuse. But to be honest with you, one that I use that's on my phone and laptop that I do just for cheat sheets if I'm not writing things specifically or publishing content is Bard. That's Google's product, which is also free and in beta. And what I love about Bard is the latest feature is it actually integrates with your Google Docs, Google Excel, Google Presentations, and your Google Gmail. So if you're saying, hey, how many emails have I gotten from Jane Smith the past month? It'll know because it can connect back with your Gmail account and let you know. Or if you want to say that, hey, I need to be able to fly to Denver on Monday and fly back Friday based on the meetings I have, what's the ideal flight times? I'll help you. Pretty darn cool.
And that's one thing, some of the apps that you have mentioned, as well as other resources, we have in the future partnership rooms over in the directory. So anytime you can come back or after this, you can drop in there and we utilize and put resources there. So you'll have a resource center and based on, because we all like to know where we can get our hands on stuff.
Hey, Sol, I have a quick question for you. You mentioned in the hiring process for future talent around people who can help with AI strategies that the HR team needed to know the difference between, I forget what it was, in a Pokemon card. What do you do if they don't know the answer? Like, how are you finding talent if you're not convinced the people know how to even think about it? Like, how are you solving that problem? Because I think there's a lot of people out there pontificating that they know how to be a prompt engineer or any of this sort of stuff, but it's not always true. So how are you thinking about the talent pipeline for this, or are you finding bright people and investing in them?
I'm lucky in the sense that I've been doing this for a while, so I kind of have access to the network, and I know some bright people. Sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not, but I also know some really good consulting groups. None of them are large, none of them are the big four, but they're a bunch of engineers, machine learning model engineers, data scientists who have been disenchanted working with big companies, but they're really great. And they get to pick the project that they want to work on. So you actually have to sell them to work on your project. They're really good. But my case with the HR teams is always, listen, we can do things the way we've always had, and we're going to end up with the same results. Or we can try something different. This is a very unique area. We know we don't have the talent, and we know we don't know how to recognize the talent, with the exception of a few of us. Why would we not leverage the skill sets that we've hired to run this agenda to bring in the talent base we need, keep our and maintain our competitive advantage? And then it's just a matter of influencing. Now, to be honest with you, before I take on a full-time job, I ask them, do I have resources to bring on a team if we need talent? And I get that commitment up front. But if I'm already in the organization, then it's a matter of selling. And if I can't sell it to HR directly, I'll be damned. I'm selling it to my peers and the executives, and then they eventually get enough pressure that they release some
I'm
so
not
we
sure.
can go to.
Yeah, I want to focus my question a tiny bit because it's less about how to tell HR what to do and more about. So I'm just going to rattle back what I just heard. I just heard if I want to find the right talent, you have the Rolodex, but I need to audition to get the right talent from these guys that you know, which is awesome. And I love amplifying other organizations. Fantastic. But like if um, I'm trying to think of it like, so I'm going to go back to a past role. So in a past role, my job was to run the revenue operations. So everything quote to cash and pricing for a giant media company. And I guarantee you my CRO would be knocking on my door going, Joanna, do you have a point of view on AI? Who's the expert in your team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, I know enough about AI and stuff to be dangerous at the moment. And so I need to find somebody who knows more than I do. And so what is your advice to people who are in, like, I know that that character is out there en masse, or we all know somebody like that. So what's your advice to us on how to find that bright person who knows more than we do? Like, where are they hanging out? What are you asking them in the recruiting process? Like, how do you identify um, the people who have the potential to help us think through, to kind of be like a baby you, I guess? How do I hire who you were yesterday without it being you?
So a few comments. One, I think we've all learned nobody tells HR what to do. You need them to be your best friends, period. You never tell HR what to do, but you're like, help me help you be successful. So there is a different positioning there. The second is you got to get someone who knows the space to help you recruit. You're going to get a bunch of applications and they're going to use all the words, but you're again not going to know which is a Pokemon character versus what is a data science platform or vector database or code base. So you've got to bring someone on board who knows that world well and can help you interview. There's just no way about it. Um, Everyone wants to get into the space and people are taking online courses. So they may have been in data and now they want to pivot into AI and they don't know how. So they've taken a few courses and now they're like, hey, I know ML engineering, I know ML ops. You've got to, no matter what, whether that person is in their infancy stages or experience, you need someone who's experienced to help you interview the candidates. And your decision may be, I'm not going to get an experienced person because we are nowhere near that maturity. Hugging Faces, the Anthropics of the world are going to get that person. But I may be okay with someone who just stepped into this world and is competent, but not yet a master, because it's all I need right now. There's no shortcutting, you know, having someone who has experience in this field, interviewing someone that you want to bring on board that has experience, and sifting through the noise of words on a resume versus someone who's rolled up their sleeves and actually done the work versus taking a few online courses. The other thing is you can even use ChatGPT and say, hey, what are some interview questions that I should ask for an ML engineer? You'll ask it, but you have no idea if their responses are bogus or real because you won't be able to distinguish the difference. So you just got to get help if you want talent.
Any other questions, guys?
How can we help you?
You're so kind. Um, I don't know. To be honest with you, Amber and I have been friends. I have tremendous respect for her. We both thought that this would be a great topic for today, so I did it as a favor for my dear friend. You know, I don't know. Maybe the support for me is just be curious. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Take a course or two. There's so much free material on YouTube and LinkedIn Premium. Um, Everyone's figuring it out. So if for whatever reason you feel that there's imposter syndrome, don't. A lot of people are figuring this out and they just use the big words to make themselves like selves come across smart. This area is not
Okay. So
effective
Amber
yet.
or Team AA, can I make a request? Can we find out from Sol later what her favorite course, like what is the best gateway drug course that you would recommend? I don't need an answer today. Go find it out. And then can we put it up as in the resource place so we get the, if I was sitting next to Sol having a coffee and she said, take this course, we know which one to take.
Perfect. We'll add that in our future partnership room. I love that idea. And
Okay.
we also added some other things in the future partnerships. Baril, who's in the room, also spoke our last time and gave us some tools as well. So we'll keep that going in there. So you'll have some. Yeah, Rob, you have
No,
a
I was just
question?
saying, it's a great question.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We'll give a little emoji love. Remember, the emojis are down on the bottom. Give a little love to our vibe to Soul. Appreciate
Thank
y'all.
you.
And like I said,
Really appreciate it.
awesome. And if you want to jump to the future partnership rooms, you're welcome to. We've got different things in there on the resources we talked about. I'm going to be in there as well. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.